Okay, well, I think we might as well get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Megan Wolf, and I'm the Policy Director at Beyond Plastics. Many thanks to you for coming, and many thanks in particular to our invited guests, Gina Ahn and Michelle Walrath. As most of you know, this summer, Beyond Plastics put out a guide called Hold the Plastics, Please, for helping restaurants to reduce their use of plastic, particularly single-use plastics, which are significantly associated with emissions of greenhouse gases, petrochemical overproduction, and litter. After the guide was released, we received feedback from a tremendous number of environmental activists and volunteers enthusiastic about reducing plastic waste at restaurants. And we've since set up a partnership with Rethink Disposables and are working to help train volunteers on how to best approach a restaurant and perhaps understand the business's point of view as well as their own in working to push for change. But the voices that we haven't heard from yet are those of restaurateurs themselves, who are a vital part of this picture and whose thoughts and experience are really the center of the show. So today we want to take some time and hear from those who are most immediately in the field. We've invited some restaurant owners for whom the subject of single-use plastics has been a strong consideration for quite some time and who've already taken significant steps to reduce plastics. We're going to hear about their businesses, their motivation, their successes, and some of the challenges that they've faced in making this kind of change. And we're hoping that many of you in the audience are restaurateurs yourselves or somehow connected with the industry and will be interested in hearing about their experiences and asking questions of their own. If you do have a restaurant, please use the chat box to introduce yourself and indicate where your business is located. In the first part of the hour, we'll hear from a pair of restaurant owners and converse a bit about their experiences. And then toward the latter third, we're going to open the discussion up to questions from the audience. So we'll start today with Gina Ahn, who owns and manages Sunny's Farm and Kitchen. Gina is Korean American, and she was born in South Korea and raised in upstate New York. She graduated from Boston College with a bachelor's degree in international studies and is currently a third-year law student at Albany Law School. She was a case manager and taught English and employment education with Catholic Charities Community Services in New York City, and continued on to become a job developer at the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants in Albany. She then took her experience to start a social venture in the form of a farm-to-table Korean restaurant in Troy, New York, that connects with her family's farm in Cambridge, New York. Sunny's Farm and Kitchen opened in May 2016 and has since provided employment opportunities for immigrants as well as in-house educational services, such as English classes and computer literacy programs, with future aspirations to add on legal services. Gina was named one of Albany Business Review's 40 Under 40 in 2022 and plans to work with the law firm Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna LLP starting in the fall of 2023. All of this, and she runs a restaurant, and she has a baby. Sorry, Gina, I couldn't resist. So Gina, I would love it if you could right now tell us a bit about your business, what size you are, your location, the type of food, and what the measures you've taken are to reduce plastics.
Sure. Thank you so much for the nice introduction, Megan. So yeah, I'm Gina, formerly Gina Kim, now Gina Ahn. And yes, I do have a baby at home, a 4-month-old. His name is Noah. And I started the restaurant back in 2016. It is a small scale, single location restaurant. As Megan was saying, my background was not in the food service industry at all. I had a very short period of time where I was exposed to the industry in New York as a part-time like cafe server. But other than that, the restaurant was like a whole new animal for me. But I knew that Korean food and where Korean food comes from and the heritage and the traditions along with it were very important to me and my family. My family had moved onto a farm in Cambridge, New York, which is about 40 minutes away from Troy, prior to that in 2012. And so we had all this new produce coming out. As a family, we were learning more about sustainability and just how to grow food and the challenges that come with that, and where our food is coming from. And so with all of that, all these pieces came together, and I thought, oh, why not start a restaurant in Troy, move back to, upstate where I grew up. And so that's how Sunny's was born. But I think even from the beginning, we knew that our mission and the heart of the business was to really empower immigrant communities, especially being an immigrant American myself. I knew from seeing my parents how hard it is to learn a language, to have your first job, to even understand the norms of working in a new area. And so with that, we wanted the restaurant, the kitchen, all of it to be a safe place for people to gain those skills, and even transition out. And so something that we do is, look at someone's career goals and help them get their first footing with the restaurant, but then also move on towards their future goals. And so now we have English classes 4 times a week. We actually shut down the restaurant between lunch and dinner in order to host them and to make sure that staff can attend if they would like. And then, of course, I think built into the fabric of our restaurant is, thinking about sustainability in all aspects. And I think that's why environmental sustainability comes into play. With the farm, I think naturally a lot of the practices that come from Korea are very mindful of waste, of being resourceful. It hasn't been long since Korea has become a more developed country, and people tend to forget that when they watch K-dramas and listen to K-pop. But even my parents, they remember what it was like to go hungry and to see people starve. And something that we still carry on even in our restaurant is thinking about how we can reduce that waste and make sure, for the sake of our communities, but also when it comes to future generations, to make sure that what we are practicing now is with the mindset of how that's going to leave an impact on our planet in the future.
Wow. So you guys are very, very mission oriented, which is fascinating to hear so many aspects of your mission. Tell me more specifically about plastics and your mission. I'm seeing it, as a waste issue, but where were the places in which you were developing your restaurant when you decided, okay, we're going to push back against what in the United States is dominant, which is plastic?
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, as having been in the restaurant industry now for 7 years, which is still sometimes a comparatively short time, it is really hard to make that decision to invest into non-plastic use and making sure that we take the less convenient route. But I think for us, that was really important. It was a big part of our entire branding. So just even the visual and the marketing and who we are as a business. But I think we looked at every little detail, as a lot of restaurants do when they first start, of how, what kind of utensils you're using, what kind of cups when you're serving water. And so the way we function, because we are counter service, I think we have a little bit more freedom to let customers even participate in that engagement. And so for us, we had a compost station set up that people could sort their trash based on what type of trash it is. And it's funny because I think in a lot of other countries, even Korea, that's a given. We never think about sorting our trash here, and everything's kind of single stream. But I know even in Korea, they'll actually always have different types of trash bags and different sections for different kinds of waste. And you actually get fined if you don't follow those guidelines. And so we had that compost station. When we're looking at our disposables and takeout containers, we're extremely mindful of where we source from, making sure to choose businesses that are also committed to producing only compostable items.
So if I walk into your restaurant in Troy, what am I going to see? You're a counter service restaurant, so I'd come up to the counter and I'd place my order, and then I would receive it. And what kinds of wares would I receive it on? What would I see that might have been plastic that you made a choice won't be plastic?
Sure. So everything comes in these beautiful, brown paper compostable bowls by Be Green Packaging, and something that changed from COVID is that whereas before we did have all dishware for dine-in, our takeout customer output has increased significantly. And not only that, it's really hard to find staff to work in the kitchen. kitchen. So one choice that we made for the time being until we can get staff up to par is still using those disposables. And so when you come into our restaurant, you'll see all these brown containers, even spoons and chopsticks. They're either plant starch or other compostable items. We're starting to move back into using dishware for certain items, so we don't overwhelm the kitchen staff. But yeah, so that's something that you'll see.
Awesome. So I'm curious too. So if I've had my meal, as an American, I'm not often accustomed to busting my own tray and then also sorting what's going to become compost. Somebody has asked already in the chat, what is the contamination rate for the public compost bin? Am I likely to hit the right bin?
Yeah, and so the way we have signage in our restaurant, we'll have compostables. It'll say like anything that's brown, and that tends to reduce the contamination. And people, but at the same time, I think sometimes customers are less likely to read the signs that we actually put up. And staff will have to spend a good amount of time sorting through trash at the end of the night. You'll see, cans and bottles or other landfill that they bring in from outside the restaurant ending up in the trash. And so again, it's not the easiest or most convenient thing to do, but there is a certain level of sorting that needs to be done.
Right. Now, who is your clientele? To what extent do you have people coming in because, well, you have so many arms of your mission. So who is coming in for the food? Who's coming in for the mission? Who's coming in because it's wet outside or because they're interested in Korean food specifically?
So our clientele is extremely diverse. I do have to say, I think the core reason that people come to the restaurant is for the food. Yeah, we have a social mission, but I don't think they would come back if they didn't think our food was that good. And so, and that's also something that we share with our staff and really drill into our mission is that we can do all of these things with the community, but ultimately our forefront is at the restaurant. If we can't exhibit excellence in all that we do, from the small things to how we treat our customers, then that social mission is completely aside. And so with that, I think most of our customers come in because they want to eat Korean food or want to try it. And the thing about upstate New York is that you don't have as much exposure to different kinds of food. And so when people walk in, we see it as catching a wide net and educating people in our space about who we are and the food and the practices that we adhere to.
Huh, that's great. Well, I want to bring our second guest into the conversation now. So I'd like to introduce Michelle Walrath, who's the co-founder and CEO of Organic Crush Restaurant Group, and who splits her time between Delray, Florida, and Montauk, New York. Michelle was a health and women's studies major at the University of Richmond. She's made the connection years ago between environmental burdens and personal health, and has been working toward educating on those topics ever since. For the last 20 plus years, she's been actively involved in producing documentaries and building restaurants that are determined to change the world one thoughtful decision at a time. She loves beach time, yoga, being a mom, and collaborating with people to build responsible and life-changing businesses. So welcome, Michelle. And I want to put to you the same basic questions that we've just heard from Gina. If you can tell us a bit about your business, where you are, its size, location, what type of food, and I think you have a multi-location business. So please tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Gina, you were amazing. I wish you were doing my whole spiel because you spoke so well. It's incredible what you've put together with your mission and all the sustainability aspects of it. I know it is full-time work to be focused on those things. So we have 10 Organic Crush locations. We started about 7 years ago on Long Island, where it was somewhat limited to be able to find organic and environmentally responsible restaurants, and the concept just kept going. So we're in a bunch of different towns on Long Island, in Westport, Connecticut. We are in Richmond, Virginia, and Charlottesville, Virginia. So it's been a pretty awesome growth pattern. Megan, tell me which thing I'm going to next. There were lots of things
Sure.
to
Yeah, it's a very wide question. So
mention.
if I were to walk into one of your branches and I'm hungry and I'm looking for lunch because it's 2:14 p.m. Eastern time, what kinds of items am I going to see on the menu? And is it counter service? Is it sit down service? How do the various branches function?
Okay, so we are a fast casual as well, and we built the places to feel the environmental aspect of it. So we use wood and metal and lots of plants and um, really try to stay away from plastics in any decorating. I don't think we actually have any plastics. But then you'll go up to the counter, and we are a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's everything from pancakes to wraps to salads to bowls. You can create your own, or we've got a special signature menu. We actually have a big college corner and taco menu. Um, and so the focus is on organic, and then the ability for the guests to customize according to their way of eating, or if you have an allergy. So we're hypersensitive to gluten allergies, dairy. You can pretty much request your food to be cooked without or with any ingredients that suit you. We're all olive oil based for cooking. Um, and so it's a casual feel, but a very elevated food experience. All of our meats and proteins are grass-fed or and organic certified. Um, and so, yeah, that kind of sums up our choices.
That's excellent. So who is the clientele then? Is it a lot of college students? Are they coming because of the type of food? Are they coming because of the anti-plastic or toxics mission? Or what is your sense of who's walking in the door and what they're looking for?
We pretty much have found they're coming for the blend of what we offer, but definitely coming for the food selection and the fact that you could customize to your lifestyle and your needs. And the type of person we attract, whether they're a fitness enthusiast or a family, they tend to really care about the whole package deal. So the fact that they would be eating out of compostable wares, we use a lot of reusable bowls, cutlery. And so I think with elevated food, that elevates the experience more to be able to use reusable materials, mostly bamboo made. Um, so yeah, I think we've pretty much deciphered over the years. We opened our doors in this exact way. We have a whole line of cold pressed juicing. I think we have maybe 7 or 8 cold pressed juices and a line of wellness shots. And those are all done in glass bottles. Something we noticed years and years ago was that all of this cold pressed juicing was being done in plastic bottles. And I'd been studying plastic for years prior to opening the restaurant. And it really struck me that plastic, it never truly decomposes. It just keeps breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. And it takes years and years and years and years and years in a landfill, winds up in the ocean, and it becomes these little nurdles. One of the things I had learned years ago, the kind of the cultural name for it is mermaid tears. And so these little pieces of plastic are circulating as mermaid tears through these deep oceans and these plastic stews. And so you really could just never get rid of the amount of plastic that's in the environment. So we had made the decision years ago to stick with glass bottles for all of our cold pressed juicing. And so again, that's an elevated experience to be able to be drinking this health product out of a bottle that doesn't have any kind of decomposing issue, that doesn't off gas, that doesn't break down, that doesn't have any BPA. So I think from what we can tell, our customers really care about the connection and integration of all of it.
Do you think that those glass bottles really help you stand out from competitors?
I think so. I mean, I think so. We've committed to it, and we buy them in massive pallets and in bulk. So I hope so, because we're in it. We're committed. But I think so. I mean, what we suggest to people is that they run them through their dishwasher when they're done drinking out of them. And so they become the most perfect reusable water bottle, as opposed to worrying that you're about to lose your $30 or $50 reusable water bottle. I have 24 of them always filled in my fridge. They have a little metal top. So they run through the dishwasher, and then I fill them with my filtered water, and I've got my own reusable water bottles at all times. And I don't, the kids can take them to, they are glass, but you can put them in your backpack, take them to sports. They fit perfectly in a cup holder. So I think people do appreciate that you get a second life out of it, or a third life, or a fourth life.
Do you see people wandering around with your bottles? Have you seen clients come in with?
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially in our Hamptons location on Long Island, people will use them again and again. And yes.
What about you, Gina? To what extent do you find that your thoughtfulness about packaging causes you to stand out from your competitors? Or is it just yet another piece of a model that is so integrated?
Yeah, I think whether or not people realize it, they sense it and feel it when they're in the restaurant. And as Michelle was saying, even just like how it feels, like it is very elevated, like how it feels on your skin. Like, and we use craft paper, and it feels better than having a laminated menu like in your lap. And so I think all of those things really add to the entirety of the experience, whether or not they actually notice it. And like ultimately it makes them want to come back.
That's great. So there's never been a point where I ever thought that having a restaurant would ever be an easy, cushy job or anything other than an awful lot of work and very like a financial tightrope. And then with COVID, I know that your industry has been really, really challenged. One of the things that I had thought about and written about a lot when we were working on this guide was how important it is to stress to restaurants that they have the potential to either save money or make money by making a switch from plastics and the synthetic disposables to reusable or compostable, more sustainable models. To what extent have you found that to be true? Does the promise come through for you, or has it been another hurdle that you've had to surmount in attaining what is effectively a vision?
The success of cost savings by doing some of the things we're doing?
Cost savings or attracting clientele who are going to be interested and loyal. Are those things, have they been true for you, or have they been kind of, well, this is part of who we are and we accept the burden of it?
I think that our loyal guest, of which there are many, I think that is part of their whole package, besides noticing that it attracts a real fitness type of enthusiast and person who cares about health. We've noticed it also attracts people who are going through any kind of sickness or illness, cancer, where people have committed to a whole lifestyle change. So they're on a journey. So I feel like what we do is match up well with people who are on a journey. So they, whether it's weight loss or recovering from illness, or lowering your body burden, or newly pregnant and raising a family, like we become part of the journey that someone is on. And so a lot of the loyalty comes from that. And I think, without doing an actual study, I think that translates to repeat business, that people would keep relying on you through the different stages of their life and health journey.
That's really interesting. How about you, Gina?
Yeah, no, I agree with Michelle, but I've been thinking about this a lot though, and I do think we are in a true place of privilege to be able to afford these things, to be able to invest into more expensive, like even as a restaurant, I think about how it's so the profit margins, especially for like a family ma and pa restaurant, where you have that single location, it could hurt a lot in the short term. All you see is those expenses rising throughout COVID. Those margins got even slimmer. And Megan, we've talked about this before, but even if you are committed to using reusables, now it's really hard to find people to to wash those reusables. And then when you do, you're paying a whole ton of payroll taxes and other, workers' comp, all of those added costs that that the customer really never thinks about. And so I think initially it does hurt. You see it come out of your wallet and you see that big number, and the amount, the actual money that we do invest into those containers is quite significant. And I'd say anywhere from 10 to like 30-fold of what we could spend if it was on plastics or something, or back in the day, a lot of people use foam. And so with that, yeah, I think you have to think more long term, and know that the immediate profits or the expenses that you're seeing will come back throughout the years. And so for us, it really has become a part of, and I think we do see the return, because when people think of our food and our restaurant, it is something that you can get of high quality without having to, expend your wallet so much. And so yeah, with that, I think it is a worthwhile investment. We're looking more at this route that we're going as a whole, but immediately I feel for restaurant owners, and I don't judge them if they choose to use plastics, but I do want to say that you'll see a return, and if you're in it for the long run, that is very, very worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. 10 to 30 is a massive, massive spread in terms of, 10 to 30 times more cost. That's a really, really big commitment. What do your customers say, if anything, in particular about packaging? Have people remarked on it? Do they say good things? Do they say bad things? What kinds of comments come in?
I mean,
We get customers who like to bring back like their brown bags or their 6-pack carriers for their juices, and so it almost often maybe a customer will push us to take it to another level too. And there's certain things you can't take back in the food industry, but they'll encourage us to be creative about pushing to the next level as well. We have one pretty significant celebrity at our Connecticut location who comes to us specifically because of all the eco-ware and lack of plastic. And if we do any food delivery, to this person, we have to do in glass containers. So like that kind of stuff, that's always super rewarding and helpful to see that people really are pushing for it. We have a college location, and they've done a phenomenal job at the university level listening to the students. The students then write newspaper articles about it, and they get really involved at a PR level promoting the compostable and the reusable and so I think you take it wherever you can get it, the people who care and are involved. I also think I find it hard to believe many people would tolerate non-eco-conscious decisions from a business like mine and Gina's, and they shouldn't, but because of cost, I could see why that you'd have to make that sacrifice sometimes. But I think it just goes so hand in hand with what we're doing.
Yeah, you raise a really interesting question, or really interesting subject, about students and young people. It's often said in the environmental movement that, aside from, of course, they have a very big stake, that they can be a lot more enthusiastic about changing their customers' preferences, client preferences. Market studies tend to indicate that people who are younger are willing to spend more. Has that been your experience? Has being more sustainable helped to attract a younger clientele?
I think so. We've gotten some nice high school newspaper articles out of it, which then exposes us to some of the big high schools in our area and to a whole clientele that way. So we found it's super positive with the middle school, high school, college age.
Huh. How about you, Gina?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think from like a marketing perspective, is very Instagrammable. People like actually sharing it and laying it on the table. And so I do find that we have a lot of social media following because of that. But then we have people who notice, and also those who bring their own containers or try to, encourage us to have more reusables. They ask us when we're going to go back to dishware rather than the compostable bowls. But then we also have the occasional customer who complain about the rice sticking to the bottom of the paper bowls too. So I think from a practical standpoint, there are those type of challenges, and you have to, balance against all of it, and really use that as an impetus to start educating people. Okay, here's why. I know it sucks that the rice is sticking to the bottom, but here's why we're choosing this route instead. And you could also just eat it with the rice, and it's not too big of a problem.
You raised, actually, Gina, a really interesting point that I wanted to ask, largely for the benefit of people here in the audience who may be thinking about doing this, which is the hiccups. Some of your experiences as you've tried different kinds of wares, whether it was financial or cultural or the rice sticking to the bottom. What other hiccups have you hit in trying to maintain your sustainability?
Sourcing is definitely an issue. You can't go to Restaurant Depot and buy these type of containers. You have to plan ahead. And as Michelle was saying, you get volume discounts. So sometimes you want to order, pallets and boxes of these items, but you don't always have the funds to do that. And so I think there's a balance between, how you're, and again, you have to go out of your way to source these items. And it's very not convenient. And then there's those practical things of sometimes with the paper bowls, like the lids won't fit exactly the way you want it to. So we'll have to, tape it around, and staff have a hard time, dealing with those things. You have to figure out what kind of hot items can go in which bowls. And so there's all these little things that are so just like non-conventional that you have to test it out yourself and figure out what works.
Yeah, Michelle, you told me some stories similar to these about hot soups and cleaners. Can you tell us a little more about what happened there?
Yeah, I think so. 7, 8 years ago when we started, eco-wares were somewhat at their infancy for commercial demand. And so we were trying out different soup containers, and we have this hot bone broth that we make. And by the time the customer had, in this one example, got to the car, it had collapsed the whole container and made a mess of her car. And it wasn't every single one of the containers. So there must have been some weakness in the production. Sometimes with the eco-ware, because it's that cardboard fiberish feel, like the lids don't fit super well, because I don't know if like the mold has a hard time with the consistency, or the material doesn't mold so perfectly, or maybe heat or cold causes a misshape. So with our lids, we found we have to put a rubber band over it. The lids will like pop off for the guests. So we use it as talking points with the customer, and just blame, it's a forward thinking product. So there's going to be a few little mishaps with it. And usually people are pretty sensitive, but the hot soup one was, that's pretty nerve wracking.
Yeah, how do you appease a customer who's had that kind of experience? I have to ask, what happened with that? Was your customer did she roll with it, or was it really an issue?
Well, my memory, it's not too scarring of a situation. So my memory is that the customer must have rolled with it. I don't remember it. It was 7 or 8 years ago, but I think they got a lot of gift cards, and hopefully we won them over for life after that. But
that brings me to thinking about some of the people who are on the front lines of the front lines, which are your staff, your employees, who have a lot of interactions with customers on this and other levels. First of all, I'm curious, have you found that having an eco-minded workplace actually attracts employees, or is it one is as good as the other?
For me, yes. Again, and yes, we have found that it's the mission is integrated with the type of person we're attracting, from caring about the food sourcing to the environmental sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. Same for us. We get, and it was very helpful, especially when staffing was a concern or an issue. We would actually not need to even put out a hiring ad, because a lot of students would come to us wanting to work with us. And so I do think it makes us stick out as an employer, and it also makes our staff think that yeah, we're investing to, much more than just making a profit.
That's wonderful. My next question was going to be about how to keep your staff motivated, but it sounds like you're actually attracting a motivated staff by dint of who you are. Is that the case?
Yeah, I would say so. And the messaging about minimal waste and about carrying the whole message through, I think resonates. I think we could honestly probably be doing even more and pushing the messages in even further and connecting more dots. So we don't print receipts at our restaurant, which many don't anymore, but those usually have a BPA film on them. And every time a cashier is touching a receipt, they're getting whatever this micro dose of BPA on your fingers, and then you would eat something or touch your face. And so we could do a better job like reminding people of that as well. Our staff gets a meal on the house with every shift they work. And so we tend to make those connections of the perks of the job, but we could probably take it even deeper with the health benefits of working in a place where there's not a lot of off-gassing and toxic chemicals, and even the paint we use on our walls is the Benjamin Moore. I'm blanking on what the initials are, but the paint that doesn't have any of the toxins in it. So really, they're working in an environment where it's clean and safe, and if you're there 6-8 hours a day, that's a nice perk.
So it's literally more than soup to nuts care that you've taken, but rather floor to ceiling as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So what went right in all of these endeavors that you didn't see coming? We've talked about hiccups, but what were the surprise positives?
You're talking about over the time we've been in business.
Yeah, sudden or over a long period of time. I certainly would consider being able to attract staff just by being awesome a surprise benefit, but maybe that's because I never really consider like, well, someone would want to come work for me. So what things have gone right that you actually wouldn't have seen coming, but that turned out to be really good benefits from your business model with this?
Well, I think our decision on what type of disposables to use is definitely a small part of a bigger picture. So it is consistent with our branding and who we are as a business. But I think ultimately, what I found surprising is like who does notice, and when they do bring it to our attention. And even I feel like we've had a lot of media attention with local newspapers who see what we are doing and want to highlight that, and then being able to connect that component to our family farm. So all of it, I think it just weaves together, and customers will even bring up how those connections are being made. And so like with the farm, when we have the food compost going back, even that in itself, it saves us a lot with the feed that we have to give to the chickens. And even going back to the staffing question, I think being able to retain staff longer than the average restaurant, and like Michelle was saying, providing a positive environment goes a really long way.
Mm. From the story.
I would second that. It just that, being able to be a trusted source, we're in everything we do, we've put thought into it. So it just makes, everything you're doing and the people you talk to, it's all pretty authentic, very authentic, and you get to always be you. So it's just even something like today, it's not a nerve-wracking experience to sit here and talk about who we are. And, I really think it's up to I'm part of grassroots and lobbying efforts to make changes at state levels, but it comes down to consumer demand, and what the consumer is willing to purchase. And so as a business owner, you know, the thing that is super rewarding is just to be able to offer, you know, these are the choices, and this is what we put out there, and ultimately, you know, costs should come down. We're just at a tough time in history, but costs should come down ultimately.
Mhm. So the integrity of the model is paying itself forward, it sounds like. That's
Yeah.
really good news. So here's a slightly thornier question, but it's one that comes up a lot among people who do a lot of reading and who tend to be, I think, your educated clientele, which is the question of just how compostable are the compostables, and, you know, are these products what they purport to be? To what extent have you had patrons who were concerned with that, and to what extent have patrons been just kind of like, okay, they can see that you're doing your best under the circumstances? Have you heard from patrons about this?
Very infrequently for me, but I do know what you're referring to, and yes, it
Mhm.
has come up. You know, doing the best we can do that's where we've earned our trusted voice, and you know, minimal plastic, as little plastic as we can summon, as we can contribute, is going into the earth and the oceans from our business.
Mhm. Gina, I see you nodding too. What were your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, I think for us too, there's not too many people who get into that level of detail, but there are times when you know, a customer will come to me with an item, and that's landfill, and they're like, where do I put this? You know, and I think that kind of engagement is more frequent. One time we had someone who asked if we have if there's a commercial composting facility that we actually work with. And so I know there was one in the area called Food Scraps 360
Mhm.
that was short-lived, and then they kind of disappeared. And I believe they're coming back again, or in a different form. And so those are things that I think we're challenged as well to
Mhm.
rethink and learn about, like, where does this stuff actually go when it comes to recycling and the actual facility that is going to. We know where the food scraps are going, but everything else, I do have my doubts
Mhm.
when we talk to people about the details.
So when a person busses a table at your restaurant, Gina, they're not necessarily throwing their packaging into the compost. It's the food scraps, and then the packaging goes into a separate container.
Correct. And we had to do that for practical reasons. Our farm isn't a commercial composting facility. And my understanding is that there's a lot more that goes into that. And so for us as a family farm where we have events, we limit things just to the food scraps, and then a separate container for the paper products.
Yeah. So there are some interesting questions coming up in the chat, and I want to get to them in just a minute. But before I wrap up with my questions, I also would like to ask, what words of wisdom would you have for restaurateurs who are interested in reducing their plastic based on what you've done? What would you tell them not to do, and tell them also to do?
I think testing out the products you're bringing in, and usually you can get samples at no cost to work with to get started. I think committing, you know, trying to work with one of the bigger aspects of your restaurant that could use an overhaul. I guess you could go both ways with it. Start small or start big. We kind of just started big because it like cleans up your thinking when you're on a certain track. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, we're gonna use as little plastic as possible. So we have to there's like a hierarchy of decisions that you make based on that. Um, and you do the best you can, one decision at a time.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, it is a very worthwhile investment, where some of the costs that or the expenses that you think you're taking on, you can actually save in other ways. And I find that if you pay more for your disposables, you actually try not to waste as many as you should. So even when a lot of times with our staff, we go crazy about this, but it's easy to take 2 lids instead of just 1. And so we'll be like, everyone will kind of flip through to make sure there's only 1 when we're packing everything. Even when we have shift meals, our staff will never use a disposable to take their food home. They'll just wrap it up and take the bowl home and bring it back the next day. And so I think there are ways to reduce waste. And in other areas that really count, rather than thinking that you're spending a lot of money on what's really an investment.
Sure, yeah. So some of the questions in the chat actually relate pretty closely to some of this. Someone has asked whether either of you has ever considered reusable takeout containers, or what kind of feedback you get from customers who want to bring their own containers or coffee cups, etc.
Yeah, due to Board of Health reasons and contamination, we try to stay away from, we do stay away from people bringing in their own containers. We have grade A scores from Board of Health. We have to just watch that. We're just not don't have that ability. There's probably an opportunity to really research that process, but so far we don't really take the reusables.
Yeah, I know they can vary a lot from state to state and even county to county. So would that include, Michelle, something like a reusable cup, like a coffee cup?
Yeah, so far we haven't encouraged that. People haven't really asked for it. So there might come a time where it works again, but I think especially coming out of the last few years, we've stayed away from that route.
And I think COVID has really made that a hard thing to do, even if there's solid evidence that microbes don't get transferred on items. People still have that kind of like ingrained in their minds where COVID can there, like anything can happen. What is outside, it could be brought in. And so with that, we're still at a place, I think, where people aren't ready to bring in containers, or our staff isn't ready to take those on as well. But in the future, I think if we talked about this before too, but I think having like a branded bowl would be really nice, or especially for our repeat takeout customers. And yeah, we've had instances at the farmers market where people will bring their plastic in, so we'll just kind of like hand it to them without the container so they can put it in themselves.
So hopefully there's a bright future for this, but it sounds like the COVID ick factor has been a significant shadow. We have some questions about what brands of compostables you use and why. Any particular ones that you might recommend to other cafes?
We use Be Green, so BE Green packaging. And we found them to be very reliable. I think that's important. And there was a period when the supply chain was disrupted and it was harder to source it. But I think you want consistency in the product that you're delivering. And when your sole provider is unable to do that or keep up with the volume, Be Green has been very they've been dependable, on-time deliveries, and they have bulk discounts as well, which we definitely use. So we even have a storage facility separate just for our containers, and we have the luxury of having that too. Not a lot of restaurants can say they have that kind of space.
Yeah. What about you, Michelle? What are your favorite?
I was just
brands?
emailing a couple of years ago, we hired a sourcing manager. So I was just emailing him. I know I submitted our line that we use to the we're Ocean Friendly Restaurant certified. So I had submitted the brands that we use a couple years ago, but they're not jumping out at me, the names of them. So I can send it to you, Megan. I don't have it like at my fingertips what we're currently using for our various lines of of different products.
Someone's asked what deep green packaging is. Have
Oh,
you
I
heard
think
of
that that's where they misheard and thought it was deep green, but it's bee green.
Oh, bee green. I see. Okay. Here's a question actually I was thinking about asking myself, which is this is from a volunteer who would like to work with restaurants and is wondering, she says, I'm very interested about holding the plastic, but not sure how I can ask my local restaurants to take on a 10 to 30% expense increase. How does one have this conversation? If you were approached by a patron who, wanted to tell you how to run your business in a more green way, what would allow you to hear them, or what would be a polite way for you to hear a request?
Oh, I want to first correct and say it's not 10 to 30%. We're talking like 100 to 3,000%. Oh, no, not 100. It would be 1,000. So I think it's more of the price increase is like multifold. But yeah, I think from a lot of restaurants and restaurant owners are less keen on taking advice from someone who hasn't done it before, especially when it comes to the nitty-gritty expense side of things. So I would say for customers to come and really just express how important that is to you as a consumer, and what that means, and how you have a lot of friends who are interested in that too, and why why you would support a restaurant who's adhering to that kind of mission. I think that would be probably the biggest impact that you can have.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, anytime you can ask nicely, would you ever consider switching to an eco-ware? It means a lot to me, and just expressing the interest. I think your site provides great information on reusables and sourcing. So I think the stronger those resources start to get, the easier it is to bring to restaurants. Like ocean friendly restaurant certification provides resources too. And so sometimes giving that to the business owner who has so much else on their plate and just saying, I read this great article recently, there's some resources here,
And I just want to add on and say, I think ultimately, oh, excuse me. I think ultimately having something mandated is kind of the foolproof option. So having your city and your county adopt those policies. I know for us in Troy, our farmers market, it's not even the city or necessarily, but it's the administration of the farmers market that makes it a policy that if you're a vendor, you have to use certain types of compostable takeout containers. So with that, whether you like it or not, if you want to be in the Troy market, that's what you have to do.
So policy change. Actually, Michelle, you mentioned that you are very interested in environmental nonprofit work on kind of a higher level, and educational and other aspects. Have you looked at policy issues in regards to food and toxicity and the kinds of packaging we're talking about today? And would you recommend any particular policy with that in mind?
I can say I've studied that super closely recently. I'm super involved with a group called grassrootsinfo.org, and they do a lot of activism around the whole tri-state on all different types of legislation related to body burdens and the choices we make, and keeping chemicals out of the everything from landscaping and schools, and they're really big at the school level. So on food policy, I'm not updated right now.
Mhm. I'm interested because you have many different outlets and they're in different states and cities. To what extent do you face different local ordinances about, say, skip the straw or skip the stuff or plastic bags here but not there? How has that impacted your different outlets?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it becomes part of your operation of that specific location. So it's no problem where if if there's no plastic bags allowed, that's obviously easy for us. But only giving a straw upon asking, or yeah, that's great. That's not hard to do, and the people we work with usually respond pretty quickly.
Mhm. Audience members, if you still have questions, please put them in the chat or even just raise your digital hand. I can't see the full gallery of people with their cameras on, but I can certainly see who's on the call, and we would love to hear from you if you have any questions for our guests. Let's see. In the chat, the questions continue. Oh, with the compost bins, actually, someone was wondering about the general contamination rate. I know, Americans are not necessarily used to putting their scraps in indicated areas. So, Gina, how well does it work?
Oh, with our food bin, I'd say people are usually good. Again, it all comes down to signage, making sure it's very clear, like food only, and but even then, you have the occasional person who throws their chopsticks in there as well. But yeah, no, contamination wise, customers, I think, do a fairly good job, or sometimes they just leave everything on the table anyway, so we end up sorting through it.
Okay. In the world of utopias, if it came to pass that all restaurants were using fewer plastics and had moved over to other kinds of systems, do you think that you would lose clientele because now everybody's doing it, or do you think that you might have had a leading edge of like, yeah, hey, they were doing it before it was cool?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, bring it on. The more the merrier in this party. Get everyone switched over as soon as possible.
I know I've spoken with some restaurateurs who said with a little bit of irritation, the guy down the street started copying us after we stopped using plastic. And I thought, wow, that's a good problem to have. So hopefully it wouldn't be so
Definitely.
much of a problem.
Definitely.
I see another question in the chat. Someone's wondering, how big are your restaurants? The beach restaurants that we're trying to support in their transition on the Red Sea are afraid of not being able to wash all the reusable dishes fast enough for the 100+ people that they can host at the same time, or that people would steal them. Have those been issues for you?
We have not noticed theft at all. Our restaurants are about 2,000 square feet. So we would see 50, 75 people an hour in the middle of like a busy lunch rush.
Mhm.
And so far able to keep up.
What about condiments like soup, cracker packs, etc.? What do you do when a takeout customer wants ketchup or other sauces?
We have these little portion cups where we'll just have a squeeze bottle and put it, do it for the customer. But even that, I think that's a big point of waste, where our kimchi and the sauces we put in the cups, but not everyone wants them. So I think even asking if they want it in the first place is a good practice.
Do people often opt out of the kimchi and the sauces?
I think the ones who are more waste conscious will tell us even before because certain items, I think that's how it's traditionally served. So we want to make sure we're consistent with that.
Right.
But then people will say, oh, hold the kimchi or hold the sauce. And we do appreciate it.
Right. Certainly. Do you have opt-out options for utensils or straws on takeout orders?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I mean, that's a cost saving measure overall. And it's great for all of us. And so some systems have it built in. So like third-party processors like Grubhub or Uber Eats, they'll have that option already. For one that is on your own website that you might have to design yourself, we put it in as kind of like an add-on. So it's not the default. So people will actually have to opt in order to get utensils for takeout orders.
Mm.
Well, so I want to give each of you the opportunity to have a last word as we prepare to close. If you have anything in particular that you would like to tell an audience or somebody who is interested in doing the work that you've done with reducing plastics, what are your kind of take-home thoughts? It's a little bit
Well, it
wide
was
open.
lovely
Do you
doing
want to
this
start,
with
Michelle?
you. Sure. It was lovely doing this with you. It's nice to know that we're like-minded souls out there. I think if anyone wants to follow up, I can try to get a more thorough list of the products we're using. And yeah, it's like a little discovery. It's a journey and path to go down, but super rewarding.
That's great. And you, Gina?
Yeah, I did all that, and I just want to say it's really hard. It's really hard out there, and it's hard just even surviving at times and keeping your business going, making sure you have enough staff to do everything. It's not easy. So sometimes this is kind of like in the back of your mind. And I think, you know, we're not perfect by any means. And I think if you want to get started, you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be 100% as soon as you enter that realm. You learn as you go, you make mistakes, and, you know, we're still trying to figure it out and see what's feasible at different times. And so, just give it a shot.
Okay, well, thank you both for your time, your participation, and most of all for your fantastic food, which I am particularly hungry now. You guys have worked up an appetite. So thank you also to our audience, and we will try to follow up with any information that our guests pass on about brands, etc. We'll send along to our attendees. And yes, we did record this, so we'll be posting it on our website if you want to share it around. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
everyone.
Megan.
All right. Bye-bye.